Welcome, everyone. I'm Exodus Octavia Brownlow, and I'm so very happy to be here. I'm thankful for the Rural Assembly's invitation to open for this year's Rural Assembly Everywhere. I'm a fiction, nonfiction, and poetry writer native to Black Hawk, Mississippi. When I'm not writing, I'm a seamstress with a sweet tooth for vintage fashion. But for mostly, I like to describe myself as an optimist. I must be. As a Black woman, I take on the optimistic tradition that my ancestors must have had come to for survival, for their children, and ultimately for the future. My art is evidence of that future, and I'm dedicated to writing the happy endings that my people have yet to see. It is my birthright, and ultimately, it's the bedrock to our shared democracy. It's what inspired this piece that I will be reading for you all today. And so today, I'll be reading a selection from my essay, We Deserve More Black Stories with Happy Endings, published with Electric Literature. If I want to live, I must eliminate and shun all traces of my unknown, untraceable African origins. In my research, I'm learning that it is best to do all of these survival tactics and more, but it is often not a guarantee of a happy ending to come. I am discovering that I can read all of the books, obtain all of the degrees, and speak and act in the most pleasant professional way, but there will still be a probability of bullets finding their way into my body, obliterating the very last of my blackness like something that I could not see, some bit of blackness that I had forgotten or overlooked, and like a favor is wiped away by my white neighbor. I am not white, no matter how close I am able to obtain its aesthetic and culture. I feel like I'm asking for impossible things for this time that I live in. I'm too close to the time of segregation, too close to the time of slavery, too close to an era where hate for the other still exists. But I ask these things in order to remember and keep in my heart what I can do and what can be done to make the happy Black endings an unconditional reality. Inside, the emptiness that I was left after reading Native Son had shifted. I am a happy, bubbly, too damn idealistic for my own good Black girl. I cannot deny it. And it is often hard for me to stay upset. Like Bigger Thomas, there is some subconscious understanding of myself, an ending that I can clearly see. As hope begins to thrive again, I decide that I will write the happy Black endings, despite what reality says. I have made up my mind that if I am going to die anyway, by natural causes or otherwise, I will create what I truly want to. I decide that I will offer no alternate, more plausible ending for myself or my audience. This idealistic and happy ending of mine won't exist for my reality, possibly, for my time, possibly, but it will exist for my children and my children's children. When I am old and my life is nearly at an end, they will ask me how I knew to dream for more, how I dared to write the worlds that demanded the best from humanity, despite all of the opposing evidence that it would not come into fruition. In response, I will say that I was psychic. I will say that I saw the future and it was bigger. Thank you all so much to listening to my reading today. And thank you, and a very special thank you to my dear and talented friend Xander Brown of the Daily Yonder. May our collective optimism fuel our hopes, our disagreements, and our coming together. Thank you.
That was Exodus Octavia Brownlow of Black Hawk, Mississippi. reading from her essay, "We Deserve More Black Stories with Happy Endings." Thank you so much, Exodus, for being with us today. So hi, friends. My name is Whitney Kimball Coe, and I'm the director of the Rural Assembly. I'm thrilled to welcome you to our fourth gathering of Rural Assembly Everywhere, a virtual festival for rural leaders and advocates, rural admirers, neighbors, and the rural curious. We started Everywhere back in October 2020 when the pandemic was reshaping the ways we connect with our friends and our neighbors. And since then, we've welcomed more than 4,000 registrants from all 50 states and 9 countries to this virtual front porch, which is what our pal Kim Cover-Smith calls it. If you're a returning participant, and if you've joined this virtual front porch before, please drop a note in the chat and tell us what brings you back. And if you're new to this gathering, please tell us what pulled you in. We're so glad you're here. We hope you'll make use of the chat feature on whatever platform you're viewing today, because we want to hear what resonates with you. We want you to capture quotes and insights there and ask questions and drop links to resources and complimentary stories. The chat feature, I believe, is where we can find one another today and build some common purpose over the next 2 days. So what can you expect in terms of programming over these next 2 days? We're excited to bring you both recorded and live conversations among rural leaders who represent a diversity of geographies, backgrounds, and experiences. And sprinkled in between those conversations, we're proud to share videos of your stories and performances, which many of you submitted leading up to this event. These short videos are windows into the rural spirit. They give a glimpse of the many ways rural people and places are showing up right now, and I hope you'll watch them all. Before I introduce our first conversation, I want to offer some brief housekeeping tidbits. If you prefer a viewing experience with captions, please head over to our YouTube channel. If you have to step away from your screen and regret missing some of the program, don't worry. You can return to whatever platform you're using and rewatch the portions that you missed. We'll also post individual sessions and videos to ruralassembly.org after the event. And finally, we hope that you will want to join one of our breakout sessions later this afternoon and our happy hour later this evening. You'll receive an email with Zoom links to those sessions, and we'll also drop them in the Crowdcast chat. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our first conversation. It's brought to you through a collaboration with Welcoming America, which is an organization that's dedicated to leading a movement of inclusive communities, becoming more prosperous by ensuring everyone belongs, including immigrants. So this conversation features 3 incredible women leaders in Crete, Scottsbluff, and Lincoln, Nebraska, who are working to build stronger connections between immigrant and non-immigrant communities. They're working to fight against divisive rhetoric and to ensure that inclusive policy is the norm in their communities. So as you listen to Krista, Valeria, and Nancy tell their stories, please drop questions and comments in the chat. This is a pre-recorded conversation, but we're excited to have all 3 women, plus Molly and Lola from Welcoming America, with us in the chat right now to respond to your comments and your questions. So let's jump in.
Valeria and Nancy, but I'm also an elected official now in the county that I live in Lancaster County. And so I've been able to make some things happen that way, change some policies, create a strategic inclusion plan through that work. But I wanted to allow each of you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your community where you live and work. Valeria, do you want to start us with that?
Sure thing. My name is Valeria Rodriguez. I was born in Reynosa, Tamaulipas, Mexico. My family and I, we immigrated to
Yep.
Mitchell, Nebraska in 2000 when I was only
I
5
kept
years
on
old.
hearing like pings and
We
dings, and I was
lived
like,
the
oh God,
undocumented life
it's not
for
working.
about 8 years.
They can't hear
Thankfully,
me.
my dad, he was able to
Speaking.
become a U.S. citizen and petition for us. And, you know, this is home. We've been here ever since. You may be asking yourself, where is Mitchell, Nebraska? We are in Scottsbluff County. We're about an hour from the Wyoming Colorado border and about 8 hours from Omaha, Nebraska. We have a population of about 30, a little over 30,000 individuals in the county of Scottsbluff, and over 27% of that population is people of color, specifically Hispanic, Latino, immigrant community. A little bit, in addition, I mean, a little bit of my background. I currently work for Immigrant Legal Center full time as a paralegal, and I am the part time executive director of Empowering Families, and that is an organization I founded back in 2018. And we work to build a stronger and more welcoming community through education, civic participation, and individual empowerment.
Nancy, would you, I'd love to hear about you and have you introduce yourself.
Thank you. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity. My name is Nancy Telles, and I work as Community Assistance Director for the City of Crete, Nebraska. And what I do here in the Community Assistance Office is helping connect clients not only from Crete but from surrounding communities to different resources such as housing, immigration services, and also connecting them with other city departments. And so that's one of the pieces that I enjoy the most about the work that I do here every day is working with other city departments. A little bit about my background. I'm originally from Michoacan, Mexico, and my family moved to Idaho in, I believe it was 1993. And from there, we heard about, well, my parents heard about the different opportunities in Nebraska. And so they were looking to make a better wage. And so the family moved to Nebraska, and we have been here ever since. I have been in the Dorchester Crete area for the past 13 years, and I have been working in different capacities. I worked for Crete Public Schools for about 8 years, and then in 2018, I started working for the city of Crete.
Well, and Nancy, one of the things that I see you doing a lot, and where I've engaged with you, is you also are really instrumental in the community in organizing some of those events that sometimes we call them bridge building events or neighbor to neighbor events where people really get to meet each other, celebrate culture together. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. So there's been two different events that I have really been involved along with a lot of community partners, and that's one of the things that I always like to mention is that the work that I do here in the community assistance office wouldn't be possible without a lot of my community partners. Um, we host a welcoming meeting on the first Tuesday of every month, and during one of the meetings, we were thinking of ideas to um, continue the Don't Equity Fund, which is a fund to help families that have children that want to engage in different activities. And if the registration fee is a barrier, then they can fill out a short application and get assistance that way. And we came up with the idea of hosting a community World Cup event. And I have always enjoyed soccer, and so I thought this was a perfect idea. Um, so what we decided to do is reach out to community businesses and see if they'd be willing to sponsor a team. And then the business would also be able to select the country that the team would be representing. And all of the funds would be going to the Don't Equity Fund.
What does that inclusion mean to you? What does inclusion look like in your community? What does it mean to you, and how do you you mentioned these events. What else do you do to try and achieve that?
Well, one of the things that I try to do is really listen to my clients and learn about what they're seeing in the community. because a lot of the times we can't really just focus on what we believe needs to happen in the community. We need to hear the people in the community and see what different things they're seeing or how we can improve. And so that's been huge working here for the city. How I have had clients tell me, I've never entered this side of City Hall. My office is on the left side of City Hall, and downstairs is Public Works. So clients, I believe, were just used to going to pay their utility bill, and so it's wonderful to see that they're more comfortable coming into City Hall. And I have a lot of clients that will ask me, well, can you tell me about what the other offices are for? What do they do for the city? And so educating about the different roles of city employees, I think that has been wonderful.
Valeria, I really saw your head nodding as Nancy was saying we need to listen to people. We need to hear what they're concerned about.
I completely agree that we have to listen to our community members. I was reading through a strategic plan through the city of Scottsbluff, and a lot of our community members that took part in that strategic planning process and the focus groups talked about how there's a huge divide between our East Overland community, which is predominantly people of color, and our white community. And people have these stereotypes and misconceptions about East Overland, that it's the ghetto. If you go over there, you're going to get shot, that it's unsafe, and so forth. And so, our community, they feel that, right? Our community, we feel that divide, we feel that that tension, and really, community members are ready to create that change, to make those changes so that every neighborhood is feels like they're represented by their local officials, and local government, and that anyone from any part of the community can go to any neighbor in any neighborhood and feel comfortable and feel like they're included, and so forth. And so we're ready to really get that work done and start those and be a part of those conversations and those changes that need to be made, but also be a part of uncomfortable conversations that need to be had about biases that individuals may have, and really educating as well. And that's more important, is educating individuals in leadership positions, or just individuals that want to be a part of the solution and change, and making this change happen, and ensuring that it does happen, right, by educating everyone regarding how we can do that effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. You said having those hard conversations, and that's hugely important. And I think here in Nebraska, we've been kind of conditioned to not have those hard conversations, right? But I have found that people are more ready to engage in those conversations to a certain extent. Even in our rural communities, I've been working in several of the communities across the state, and we've been having these conversations, talking a little bit more about race and equity, talking about immigrant inclusion. And I feel like there are more people on board to talk about this than there were 10 years ago. But I'm curious, Valeria, especially in your role, are you finding champions? Are you finding that people are willing and ready to talk with you? And what is the resistance that you're finding?
When we're in these conversations, folks bring up the demographic changes. In our public schools, it's becoming a minority majority. It's at 50-50 at the moment. And so those are the reasons, basically, why we're starting to have these conversations.
These difficult conversations are something that needs to happen. And it's good to see that our local leaders, and for example, our police chief, Chief Hensel, he's the police chief, and he was telling us that there's a project that he's doing with limited English proficiency. And currently in the Crete Public Schools, there's 56% of students identify as Spanish as their dominant language. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that our communities are changing, and we need to be prepared to make changes, because We need to have language access, like Valeria was saying. Um, Information that is being sent out to the community needs to be in other languages, not only English.
You know, your police chief has made statements in the past about things that need to be changed for the better in the community that would help them keep the community safer. It's great to have champions like that in a community that will go ahead and look at things that need to be changed, like the language access, those sorts of things. Valeria, are you finding champions that are ready to take some next steps?
Yeah, we definitely are. I think it's also taking us to educate them as well as to how they can be those champions, right? And it's going to take time, most definitely, because as we educate, we're also trying to build authentic relationships as well and authentic partnerships.
Yeah, I think that what I have found is that most people want to do the right thing, but they don't have the experience to know what the right thing to do is. And I feel like that as you talk about education, either through education or through just getting to know their neighbors in a deeper way and knowing how policies might adversely affect their neighbors, helps them to see, oh, that is something we could change. You know, we've talked about how there's some of the challenges of this work, and it does wear on you. Sometimes you feel like you're not making much progress or you've had a bad conversation. What do you do to sustain this work? What do you do to sustain yourself and those that you work with? How do you keep them, um, you know, so that they're ready to take the next steps and not give up?
I think for me, it's remembering my why I'm doing this work, and that goes back to my own immigrant experience, um, and really my community members. When they're so thankful for some of the work that we've done here, and they express to you how grateful they are for the work that you're doing. That brings me back to why I'm doing this, and it brings me back to continuing to have that drive and motivation to continue this work, even though it is very hard. And you have to be in meetings where people are questioning your education and are questioning people like you go to college. And it's like, well, what do you mean people like me? Because I'm a Latina immigrant? What do you mean? But I always go back to my why, to my own immigrant story, and really to my community members.
So there's a lot of times that I have been thinking about the things that I'm doing here in the office, and there's some things that I can't help people directly, but finding ways in which that I can provide them resources so that someone else can help them. One of these things has been with the elderly population in Crete. We have a growing population of Hispanic elderly population, and working together with aging partners has been huge. They have recently reached out and wanting to provide more services in Spanish, and currently, Aging Partners serves the whole Saline County. However, since they're located in Wilbur, that has been difficult for people to be able to get transportation to go to Wilbur to get services. And learning that they were wanting to hire a bilingual staff so that they can provide services in Crete was huge. And it's going to be so helpful because a lot of the times I have clients that are coming to the office and there's some things that I can't help them with. But seeing that other organizations are seeing that need has been very, very big. And so that's something that I'm going to be able to work with them now. And so that, makes me think, what other things can I reach out to other community organizations? And, when I get to that point where there's something that is difficult, just not giving up, finding solutions and finding other people that can further help.
So, what is one thing that maybe participants, people that are listening right now, could do to help build welcoming into their community or inclusion into their community. Or, that's another thing. I'm sorry, I'm taking another turn here, but that's really kind of evolved is how we talk about this work too. We initially talked a lot about welcoming, which I still think is a very warm term, but it does kind of set up a guest and host sort of situation, right? We talk about inclusion and what that means, but more lately we've been talking about a sense of belonging and that people need to feel they belong in their community and that is really more true inclusion. So, whichever aspect of that you would like to answer, whether you address welcoming, inclusion, or belonging, what is one thing that participants could do now that could help build that in their community?
I think it starts with starting the conversation and being at the table in these conversations. In Scottsbluff, that's where we're at. That's in the stage that we're at. We definitely aspire to be a crate in having an actual individual in government, right? But for us at the moment, it's really being a part of those conversations. And, oftentimes they may be uncomfortable, but I think that is important to have in order for us to move in the right direction. And so if you haven't started the conversation, let's start the conversation and bring individuals to the table to have those conversations.
I know we mentioned building relationships, but I think a lot of times, in order to start building those relationships, we need to start sharing stories. And it's wonderful to hear. I just met my neighbor, and it's crazy how much alike we are. And so something as simple as talking to your neighbor so that you can start sharing conversations, and then that way you can start having those difficult conversations.
Where do you see the intersection of racial equity and welcoming newcomers, including immigrants, in your community?
I would say here in Crete, it would be making sure that we have um, elected officials representing our community, and that's going to be huge. Currently, I think that's something that many communities are working for, and it's going to take time. A lot of times, I know people have thought about running for office, but then they think about, well, am I really going to make a change? It's going to be difficult. I'd rather not do it. And getting over those thoughts and really taking that next step and getting those positions filled so that everybody in the community is represented.
And Nancy, I'd like to ask this question, and Valeria, weigh in because I'm sure you have an opinion on this. I do think that matters. I definitely think that representation matters. But I've also talked to people who have been elected onto a city council or a school board. I just talked to a woman the other day who was elected onto a school board and has had such frustration as a Latina about not being able to move things ahead because when you're on a board or a council or a commission, you have to work with the others there. It's not, you don't make executive decisions. She's not been able to move things ahead in the way she's wanted to, but she's also feels so beholden to the community members that elected her, and feels like she should be doing more. She's getting pressure from the immigrant community there to do more, and they don't have the understanding about that she can only do so much, and that's a really high pressure position to be in. How do we help and support those folks?
I think it also starts by educating our immigrant community and the individuals that elected her regarding that process and what it's like, right? That she can't do everything by herself, but she needs the rest of the individuals on the board, on the council, to drive change, right? And so if some of the other individuals can be receiving the same pressure that she's receiving, then maybe collectively they can make those changes, right? And so I think that educating our community members regarding that civic participation component about what it looks like to be on city council, so that they're more understanding about what her role looks like, right? But also how other representatives can be receiving some of that pressure to drive that change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would say one example would be attending a city council meeting and seeing how that process is, like Valeria was saying, educating about that. And then also realizing that, for example, at a city council meeting, people have 3 minutes, I believe, to talk about different things that they are seeing in their community, or so that would be one start, something that they could start with there.
And bring your friends to that city council meeting, right? Bring the
Mhm.
neighbors. Let's go together and see. There's always a little more strength and safety in those numbers, right? I think we've talked about this a bit, but I think that maybe you can never say enough about what are some of the biggest challenges that you do face.
I think the biggest challenges is the constant, well, we can't do that, or we don't have money for that, we don't have a budget for that. When we know that that can take place, right? We know that it can be done. Or just being in a room where folks expect you to volunteer your expertise, or you're being questioned about, like I mentioned earlier, being told, people like you go to college. I think like those are a lot of the challenges that we see here. It's just feeling like you're constantly having to validate that you belong in those spaces and having those conversations, and that much knowledge and expertise to belong in creating the changes that need to be had, right? That needs to be changed.
I wanted to go back to when you said that we don't have that in the budget, that's an answer you get a lot. As an elected official, I will tell you that there's never enough money in the budget. But the reality is, it's the priorities that you make, right? It's making a decision on what to prioritize, and they have that ability.
Krista, I would like to mention that with that, hearing our city administrator here in Crete talking about how immigrants in our community help the city of Crete be what it is today, and taking a look downtown at all the business owners, how we have a very diverse downtown area, and seeing how much they're an asset to our community. And I think that's really important to hear our city leaders talking about immigrants so positively, that I think that helps to change, people that maybe have a different opinion, and maybe they don't know how immigrants in our community are helping. And so, in my opinion, hearing our city administrator talk so positively has really helped.
Valeria and Nancy, I really want to thank you for joining me today in this conversation. This has been great. It's always good for me every time I get a chance to talk with you, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing. As we said before, it takes every one of us doing what we have to do out there, and it really makes me proud of our state that we have people like you working in this state.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Krista.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me for the Rural Assembly Everywhere virtual festival. I'm coming to you all from the ancestral homelands of the Anacostan and Piscataway people. Rural communities are beautiful places in our country. They're places where people know their kids' classmates, where open space is abundant, and where life moves at a pace that nurtures tight-knit connections. Mesita, the community where I spent much of my childhood in New Mexico, sits below a large red mesa, is about an hour from the nearest city. I remember climbing that mesa, playing in the desert, and helping my grandparents tend to the cornfield and carry on our traditions. I fell in love with rural areas in New Mexico when I was organizing in them. And now, as I travel across the country, it's clear that rural communities are blessed by natural resources, open skies, and are shaped by the land and water that surrounds them. It's also clear that the people who live in rural areas love their space and their neighbors. I know that many rural towns and communities that were hard hit by the economic impacts of the pandemic are even more pressed when it comes to the harmful impacts of climate change, like drought, wildfire, and water shortages. Many small towns have seen industries come and go, leaving behind economic instability for the families who live there. But I also know that rural communities are self-reliant and pragmatic. I know that you're not looking for a handout, but rather investments and the tools to thrive. I want to do what I can as a steward of public lands to support a vision for conservation and public land management that embraces the strengths that rural communities bring to the table. As part of the Biden-Harris administration's Rural America Tour, I was in Alaska this month to see firsthand the needs of communities in remote areas of the state and deliver some great news about the infrastructure investments available to them. The President's bipartisan infrastructure law invests in all of America, from big cities to small towns. At Interior, we're implementing $8.3 billion in water and drought resilience. With this funding and working together, we will support water efficiency and recycling programs, rural water projects, water smart grants, and dam safety to ensure that irrigators, tribes, and adjoining communities receive adequate assistance and support. This work will go a long way to accomplish our shared goal of building resilient communities and protecting our water supplies for families, farmers, ranchers, tribes, businesses, and entire communities. The bipartisan infrastructure law also includes important resources that will protect the health of our communities, like $16 billion to plug orphan gas wells and reclaim abandoned mine lands, many of which are near low-income communities and communities of color. $1.4 billion for ecosystem restoration and resilience, which goes a long way to ensuring all communities have clean air and water. But we know we can't do this alone. That's why the President's call to action to conserve, connect, and restore 30% of our lands and waters by 2030 is for the sake of our economy, our health, and our well-being. This call to action is named the America the Beautiful Initiative. It's an initiative that recognizes that every community has a role to play in our conservation future and centers on collaborative conservation. It's something that the Rural Assembly already does, and I will say we need rural voices in this work because it's going to take all of us working together to address the climate threats that put our communities at risk. We can build a better, more inclusive America for future generations. Thank you all for the opportunity to share a few words and wish you the best in the rest of the conference.
Mitakepi, chante washte nape chuzapi, tiana spotted thunder ima chapi, na la colia tashiogmuka hoashte we hemie. Hello relatives, I shake your hand with a good heart. My name is Tiana Spotted Thunder, and my Lakota name is Good Voice Meadowlark Woman. When I was writing the song Meadowlark, I wanted to mimic how meadowlarks sounded. I heard meadowlark songs from all different regions, North Dakota, Montana, South Dakota, Nebraska, and basically anywhere meadowlarks I found, they have a different song. So I just wanted to incorporate all of the different songs that they have. I love recording meadowlarks on my phone, and I just thought that that was like the biggest inspiration for this song. And I'm super glad that it came together so well and that it's such a popular song. I had no idea, but I did want to make a song that basically entailed what my name was and what the meadowlark animal was and what the bird singing sounds like to me. So I just wanted to share their song through my voice. Hey, 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 hey oh, hey oh, hey oh, hey oh, oh, hey oh, hey oh, oh, hey oh,
I moved to Randall, Minnesota in 2007 when I accepted to marry my husband who came to Mexico to meet me and my family. After a year, I decided to marry him and jump to a new life. I was full of illusions to move to a new place and have a happy life with him. But the reality was very different from I expected. At that point, I was wondering why God had sent me so far away from my loved ones. What is His purpose with me? I was into a state of confusion and I cried for almost 2 years. It was very hard. At this time, I could not leave the USA while the immigration situation was being fixed. My husband had told me that there was a nearby town where there were many Hispanic people, tried to make me more happy. He took me to meet them. He told me that maybe I would be able to work at the school since that was the profession that I had practiced in Mexico. But working at the school wouldn't be easy. They asked me for many requirements I would have to meet. So I closed myself in without wanting to go out or see anyone. I was in communication with my mother from time to time because long-distance calls were very expensive at that time. I felt desperate and told her that I was not completely happy here, that I missed everything and wanted to return. She's always been so wise and sweet. She told me a phrase that changed my life. Daughter of mine, there is a purpose for you to be there. You just have to discover it. You are like a little plant. You just have to let yourself bloom. You are very resisting to come out like a sweet potato root, and you are not blooming. My daughter, remember, in the place where God put us, we have to flourish. Her words not only made me open my eyes, they opened my spirit to see different things. There was no job for me at that time at the school, so I found a job in a store working in the vegetable area, and there I started talking to some Hispanic people who came to choose the vegetables. Later one day I went to buy a Mexican product in a Mexican store that had just opened. That's where I met my first friend, who now I consider my sister, and her family welcomed me as part of their family. That's when I realized that I was discovering that purpose of the mission that my mother spoke about was to support my people. From there, I started participating in organizations that had as projects to support the Hispanic community and feel included in the community as part of a society in which we want all of us to see ourselves as a family, in which we all participate and we create an integrated quality society so that our children grow up in a healthy environment in all aspects. I also met members of the school community and started working in elementary and secondary school as a bilingual assistant and translator, in clinics as a translator, and in basic education for adults as an instructor, where I have the opportunity to support with English classes, citizenship classes, and other projects to support all our adult students. I also have the opportunity to have contact with some families in the Hispanic community where we share experiences and support each other and help each other to have a better community. To help people who were like me, who were just moving to this country and feel sad and alone. I think I have found a mission, and I feel blessed to be part of this community, continuing to prepare myself humanly and professionally to support those who need me. I also want my daughter Isabella, who is 10 years old now, and I want her to grow up in a healthy, integrated community, and for me to be a good example for her.
There's so many freaking Indians in rural America. There's so many freaking Indians who aren't in major cities. And then there's so many freaking Indians in major cities that are just freaking poor and like cannot actually afford to like go to drama school or be an assistant in Hollywood for 5 years before they get their first writing gig. It's just not in the cards, you know. That's like, there's a big reason why it's majority white.
All you can do is one at a time, so you just keep at it. But the richness of our communities, because it hasn't been reported over the years, has left so much history untouched, has left so much news untouched, that it's just a rich vein to continue to mine.
We had shut down our tribe. We had sent our non-essential employees home to go and make sure that they quarantined with themselves and their families to make sure that they stayed safe. But we never stopped services here. We continued to deliver healthcare, social services, elder program, which was making sure that they got fed every single day. And that was of major importance to us to make sure that, again, our people had what they needed at the time, and then also felt comfortable and safe with how we were taking care of them during this pandemic.
We were getting contacted by a lot of tribes in Nevada and outside of Nevada, reaching out to us, requesting for our policies, requesting, how are you guys doing this? How are you making this work?
Ashley Wubbin from Countryside Public Health proposed a crosswalk repainting at a Granite Falls City Council meeting as an experiment in public safety. She was asked to do more research on the project and then met with Danny Prados, Granite Falls' first city artist in residence.
So we had an amazing meeting after that. And one of the things that seems to be a byproduct of working with me on stuff is they get bigger and more complicated.
So the proposed 1, maybe 2 crosswalks turned into 18, turned into 20, and an open call for artists to paint the crosswalks went out.
Their applications were considered based on the strength of their design and their relationship to the area. The theme of the crosswalks was all going to be storytelling.
So this project was called Circles of Life. Life has this whimsy of circular things happening, and some are really vibrant and some are kind of dark, and all the colors seem to blur together to make something beautiful in the end. So that's what we did here. We tried to capture the whimsy of life by taking all these bright, colorful, happy spirals and then some spirals that have more somber tones in them and working them all together into a crosswalk.
Their next crosswalk, located down Prentice Street on 6th Avenue, is a nod to Granite Falls' cooperative legacy.
This is home of the Cooperative Act by Andrew Volstead in 1922.
Gorman and Price said the clasping hands represent a collaborative spirit they witness in Granite Falls. And turns out,
what we discovered is we had very different visions of hands, and then Adam came up with a way to make them very easily unified.
You know, you start off with yellow and you go to orange and then red and then purple and then blue.
Follow the progression of the rainbow or the sunset.
We also came to the conclusion that instead of just the crosswalks downtown, we should really try to include the crosswalks around the schools because there's a lot of traffic issues over there, and public safety is really important, student safety, especially with all of the foot traffic and coming and going to school. And we thought it would be a really great way to create more relationships between the youth and those who are of a more professional ilk in the arts.
Cavender Wilson, who is a traditionally trained Dakota artist, said that she purposefully included historical elements in her design, but also elements that represent Dakota people's continued and future existence in this area.
What I think is important is, with this square here as well, is highlighting continued Indigenous presence in the area, continued Dakota presence in the area, and also to draw attention to the very, very real social and economic contributions that our people have been making to small town life here in Granite Falls. Many of the businesses that have opened up downtown recently are at least partially Native owned or owned by folks of color, and I think it's really important to highlight for the future that the future of rural places is young, it's brown, it's Native, and that's an important thing to kind of bring to the forefront.
It's clear that this is much more than an art project. The crosswalks are meant to increase public safety, pedestrian visibility, commerce, and tourism, to beautify community gathering spaces and lift up local artists, and to urge people to consider the past, present, and future of the place.
I got involved because each person plays a part. And as long as I do my part, then I'm doing enough. I am a program director for the Kelly Miller Community Center. When folks see you working so hard, a lot of times you'll pique their interest and they'll get involved. The Kelly Miller Community Center is partnered with more which is the Monticello ongoing revitalization effort. And we all work together to improve the community in areas that it is lacking.
Getting involved with the group, man, where should I start? It's been an easy process for me. I've been a resident of the area for 30 plus years. I've always felt that I should be in a position to give back. Seeing people getting involved, doing things, and when they presented this ideal of, hey, we got an organized way to make things happen in our city, let's go ahead and do it, I didn't hesitate to jump at the opportunity. School brought me to West Virginia. I was a star basketball player who started at Salem College at the time. Got married to my college sweetheart, Sherry James. Ended up staying. It's amazing the time that she puts in. She treats everyone fair. She enjoys giving back. She does it without hesitating, and you can trust her with anything.
Harrison County Board of Education donated the building to the West Virginia Black Heritage Festival. The Kelly Mellor School was historically a black high school. It was K through 12. The school board thought that it would be a good idea to donate it back to the black community. The Monticello area has always had a reputation of drug and alcohol infested area. Those of us that grew up here really never felt danger. Most of the drug activity, you didn't see it. With the programs in the community garden and the other activities that's going on in the city, we hope that we can change the outcome of our youth and have a safe place for our families and children and elderly to come.
You want to put that in there? Hey, give me that. Isabella. It's doable. That's one of the things I want to stress, that this was at one time a house that was falling apart. A friend of mine helped me tear it down. This is my mother's property, and we donated this property for some kind of community use, and it turned into the garden. I'm a pretty positive person, so I try to look on the good things. I don't focus on what we don't have. You know, we got this, and it's amazing. It took work. It took sleepless nights and wondering who we should call to get this done and that kind of stuff. But people, I think, care a little more about the neighborhood now because they do see the changes. More areas around here are starting community gardens because they saw what we were doing. It's helpful to get some buy-in, to get other people's opinions, and let them know that it's not just my garden. It's everyone's garden to enjoy and to work.
Even if you just want to come and help serve drinks to the kids, you don't have to have a special skill. We're just looking for people that are interested in getting involved. All the activities are free because we don't want the cost to get in the way of someone participating.
Does everybody have one in their hand? All right. Yeah, that piece. This piece right here is called the pawn. It's called the pawn.
We just started a chess club. We bought 6 learning chess sets. The Computer Learning Center, it was already set up for computers for the Board of Education. So we said, we need a computer learning center, so how do we go about getting it? So I went to local businesses and we asked them to donate their older computers, and they did. We will be able to provide daycare services to our adults so that they can come in and be able to use the gym or attend adult game night or go to the book club and feel like that they'll have a safe place for their children to be, which is right nearby.
3, 4, 5.
Martial arts, everybody thinks it's just about kicking, punching, but it's not. It's about making yourself whole, bringing back in the youth and giving them something to do besides out running around in the streets. Actually, I grew up right out back here. I've been in this neighborhood my entire life. And not just for this community in this area. We're trying to bring this statewide fellowship. I think is what we need now. in a lot of it.
Whatever the need is at the time, it's not just one thing. It varies all the time. So we actually call meetings just to say what's next, guys. What do we want to see happen? Those are the most exciting times for me. I'm more interested in the process, giving folks an opportunity to voice what it is they see and how they might want to strategize to make it happen. Take time to resolve it together. Different backgrounds, different career paths, sitting down at the table and saying, this is how we could do it. It's rewarding. The process is really what makes it special.
Beyond the Clock is a monthly online gathering that fosters fellowship, shared learning, and community care for rural connectors and cultural workers.
It really invites creative rural rock stars from across the country to share virtually in digital happy hours. We see them as learning exchanges and an opportunity to connect and inspire each other.
Beyond the Clock started as informal monthly gatherings a little over 2.5 years ago. Before the pandemic, we felt this need to connect across geography with other rural cultural workers in a time of tension that has only exacerbated over the last couple of years.
It's an opportunity that helps sustain the work that often feels physically and emotionally isolating. Our perspective is actually that rural arts and cultural workers often oscillate between this need to belong in their community and to be part of that culture, of that place, and this desire to intentionally not belong and to shake things up and to lead the way in embracing new culture, change of values and attitudes, and a new direction forward.
We still maintain this informal, playful, agenda-free feel, but we have balanced that out with really elevating themes and tensions and commonalities between the different challenges that our communities are facing.
In a dynamic digital space that was really emergent and evolving for the issues that were happening in our communities and as a nation, and giving us space to grapple with questions in our community and how they could be reflected back from other community change makers and what they were grappling with, the challenges and actually the steps forward that we were all making to try to make our community stronger and more vibrant and more inclusive.
We call these events and gatherings Beyond the Clock because we want to acknowledge that the cultural and connective work that rural changemakers, artists, and culture bearers are doing in and with their communities can be complex and the lines can get really blurry. It may not always, the work you're doing may not always be valued or compensated, and it often happens in the space between or beyond the meetings, the volunteer hours, the community events, and karaoke songs.
It's a beautiful space that allows you to not identify by your profession and the professional skills you might bring to your day-to-day job, but really welcomes individuals, creatives, thought leaders who are curious to grow, curious to learn from others.
And we welcome you all to join us at our monthly events, our learning exchanges, and our happy hours. You can find out more by joining our Facebook group, Beyond the Clock, or following along on newsletters with the Rural Assembly and Department of Public Transformation. Everyone is welcome to join us, and we ensure that you will leave feeling celebrated, connected, and inspired.
in a rural area is particularly challenging. Educators have a lot fewer resources often available to them.
My role is to provide informal education in after-school settings, in libraries, to work with volunteers, and essentially to be a positive youth development person out in the community. Being a rural after-school educator is incredibly important, and it feels like it's not just important to the youth, but it's this piece within the community at large, with the parents, with the schools, with the other community partners, that creates a stronger web.
The thing about after-school educators is that they are geographically dispersed, they're primarily women, and they work in assortment of program types.
There's so little expectation for them to have professional development. It's just not built into budgets, it's not built into the day's schedule. These folks often do multiple jobs, not just one. So the assumption is that they're just doing and they're not reflecting and learning.
ACRES was created to help overcome some of the barriers that after-school educators face. In an ACRES session, it often starts out with some sort of icebreaker, getting to know each other in this virtual space. We will introduce a skill and then we practice it during the session. We use real videos of educators and they reflect on those skills that they see in the videos. They are charged then with going out and creating a video clip of themselves practicing that skill. We come back together and then follow a set of norms to give each other feedback, and people are asked to find the skill that we practiced and make comments on places that we see the skill being done well, or opportunities to ask questions or to stretch a practice. We work to focus on STEM skill facilitation as opposed to teaching a specific skill that goes with a curriculum or something like that. So when they leave the program, they could really use these skills no matter what topic they're teaching. It also brings groups together that may not normally get a chance to work together. We have groups from California, Alaska, Maine, Hampshire, Vermont.
The main way we assess whether we're succeeding or not is through interviews with the participants and surveys that they all do. And we're also creating some instruments around video noticing, where we create hypothetical situations where we ask the participants to talk about what they notice and make constructive criticism that someone else might take advantage of.
Learning skills with others and applying them and getting really wonderful feedback has made me feel even less isolated. I am not alone here, and I also have an opportunity to learn and practice, which I wouldn't have been able to have just on my own.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. I'm Teresa from the Center for Rural Strategies. I'm so happy to introduce the next segment of Rural Assembly Everywhere, a conversation with Nima Avasia, native West Virginian and author of Another Appalachia, Coming Up Queer and Indian in a Mountain Place. Nima talks with Skylar Baker Jordan, contributing editor for community engagement at 100 Days in Appalachia, and today the Yonder contributor. Nima and Skylar will be taking questions in the chat on Crowdcast. Enjoy!
Hello everybody and welcome to the Rural Assembly Everywhere. My name is Skylar Baker Jordan, and today I am very excited to be joined by author Nima Avasia. She is the author of Another Appalachia, Coming Up Queer and Indian in a Mountain Place. It's out from West Virginia University Press, if I'm correct. And it is a fantastic read. Some of you will have read my review of it in the Daily Yonder, but for those of you who don't, we have a real treat in store for you today because I am very excited to introduce Nima. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Skylar. It's so good to be here with you.
It's great to have you here. I was absolutely thrilled when Whitney contacted me and asked if I would like to be in conversation with you today because in case it didn't come through in my review, I absolutely love this book. It is, I think, one of the most important and timely books of the year. I think that it puts a human and accurate face on Appalachia, which is not something that we often get. We are often stereotyped and not in a very correct way. And so this book really does, I think, a great job of correcting the record. One thing, after having said that, though, I do want to start by reading a small paragraph, and then having you respond to it, because this paragraph really summed it up for me. All right, you were talking about visiting the state parks in West Virginia with your, correct me if I say this wrong, Gujarati relations, your inherited family, as you call them, and you write beautifully, I think, about the love of place that is so true to so many Appalachians. And I just quote here: through these trips, I grew to love the wild and wonderful aspects of West Virginia, even as I struggled with the religious and racial elements. Its natural beauty settled into my sensory memory right next to the Hindu puja. West Virginia is the only home I know, though it is not a home that always loves me back. Nemo, how does it feel to love a place that doesn't always love you back?
I think that's probably a feeling that is very familiar for a lot of queer people in Appalachia, and not just in Appalachia, but really in 35 states in the United States right now, as we're seeing anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ and anti-BIPOC legislation just come down in state houses all over the country. I wish that was an experience that was only mine, but I actually think it's shared by increasingly more and more people who feel like they're really grounded in place and in the people who make up that place for them, but that the sort of policy narrative around those places has become more and more exclusive of their identities. And I think it's really hard. I think it makes you feel this very complex way of like, I love this place and I can't imagine like how this place has come to want and will such harm on me and on people like me.
It is a very interesting dynamic, I think, because you see so much increased social acceptance throughout the country. And that includes places like, West Virginia and Kentucky. I've got the Kentucky flag right behind me. Like, it's my home state. I love it. And I can experience it just on the ground, but you also see it reflected in polling. But like you said, in policy, it seems to be almost going backwards.
Yeah, and I think there is this interesting tension of, so you and I know each other and we have a relationship with each other and I accept who you are as an individual. But because that policy doesn't necessarily land on me the way it lands on you, I don't feel an impetus to fight back against it. I think that's a really hard thing in this country is that too often, I think we've seen this with COVID, actually, is a really good example of this, where it's like too often, if it doesn't directly affect me, I don't feel urgency about pushing back. I don't feel urgency about getting loud. I don't feel urgency about advocating in the opposite direction. And so then the voices that end up dominating the policy narrative are the angriest voices.
Do you think that the sort of economic stagnation, oppression of Appalachia has a lot to do with that sort of feeling of fatalistic helplessness?
I mean, I think it's probably hard for a lot of people to believe that their voices matter in some ways because so much of the policy narrative has excluded them also and hasn't met their needs and hasn't been responsive to their reality. So I do think there's a way in which also, like, I think about the West Virginia legislature and the things that they seem to prioritize relative to what people care about in the place, right? Like, the roads in West Virginia right now are a disaster. But, like, what are they, like, fighting about in the legislature until midnight on the last night of session? They're fighting about critical race theory.
Yeah.
And there's this massive disconnect between the needs of the people and what the policymakers are invested in. And so I think if you feel that continually, if you just feel like there's no response to my needs, then yeah, how do you believe that you saying anything is going to make a difference? You can't get your potholes filled. So, like, like the day-to-day of your lived reality, you're not getting your needs met. So that's not happening. It's hard to believe, I think, that you have agency or that your voice matters because what's happening doesn't reflect your lived experiences.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think that a lot of the time people outside of the region think that Appalachia isn't their concern, and they use it to sort of project and I think you really talk about this in your book, with just the way that people reacted to you outside of the region when you tell them where you're from. And it kind of reminded me of, are you familiar with the comedian Dulce Sloan?
Mm-hmm.
Reminded me of this bit she does where people in New York are saying, "You must be so glad to be out of the South. It's so racist down there." And she said, "What part of the South? You mean the part that starts at Canada and ends at Mexico?" Like, and I feel like people inside of Appalachia, and maybe you will disagree with this, maybe not, have internalized that in a way. Do you think that there's a lot of I don't want to say internalized helplessness or internalized hatred of the region? For example, I know that I left the region in part. I spent more than a decade trying to run away from the mantle of Appalachian. It didn't sort of gel with the version of myself I thought that I saw. And it was only much later into my 30s that I realized, actually, I can be all of these things at once.
Right. So I think that the filmmaker Ashley York, I don't know if you've seen her documentary Hillbilly.
No, not yet. I really want to watch it, though.
Everybody should watch it. It's phenomenal. And I think that something that she sort of lays out in that documentary is this idea that the stereotypes that exist about Appalachia exist for a purpose. They exist because if you dehumanize people, then it makes it easier to do violence to them, right? And that violence can be like the violence that happened in a place like Germany during the Holocaust, but it can also be environmental violence. It can be sort of like the destruction of a natural world. It can be the stripping of resources from a place. And so I think that documentary really helped me to sort of think a little bit differently about why people feel the way they do and why their relationships end up being so complicated, because it is like very much Appalachian people are dehumanized in the narrative. I think that J.D. Vance's book actually, in a really intense way, dehumanized the people of Appalachia. When he wrote about people as stereotypes or as tropes, he took away their humanity, right? And so what does it feel like when you're from a place, and what does it feel like to be dehumanized? What does it feel like to experience that the narrative about you and about the region that you're from is that like you're not full people? You're flat. You don't have nuance. You're not given complexity. You're just, oh, those people who vote against their interests, like they're hopeless. Like that, when that's done to you, I think it really messes up your self-perception. And it doesn't for some people. Some people are able to resist it, but I think it can really mess up your self-perception. I think it can mess up your perception of place. I think it's really exhausting and difficult to constantly have that narrative of dehumanization pushed down on you and like not either take parts of it on or feel like I have to reject all of this by leaving. And that sometimes feels like the choices that people are pushed into. I'm either going to accept it or I'm going to walk away completely.
I guess, what I want to know is, how do people outside of the region react when you tell them that, yes, I am from West Virginia, yes, I am Appalachian? Do they believe you? Do they know that there's this significant Indian community?
So it's interesting. People don't know. I mean, initially they don't believe me, and then they believe me because I'm like, well, there's no reason I would lie to you about this. But they don't know, and then their immediate response is like, wow, that must have been really hard, which in parts it was. But this is, again, a really interesting place where, like, we're not talking about small numbers of people, right? In the late 60s, after the passage of the Hart-Celler Act, there was a really specific focus on recruiting immigrants from Asia who were high-skilled workers. And those folks, when they were coming to the United States, the places they were finding work were places where American high-skilled workers wouldn't go. So that's either rural areas or deeply urban areas, but not really anywhere else. And so there were Indian physicians in Appalachia. There are Filipino physicians in Appalachia, not in small numbers. But it is an interesting thing where it's kind of erased from the dominant narrative. I was listening to Appalachia yesterday, and they had Professor Queerbilly on, Elena Anton on there, and she like said this phrase that I thought was so striking. She called it symbolic annihilation, right? Which is this idea that like if you're erased from the narrative, like you don't exist. And I think that is what has happened to Black and brown people and queer people in Appalachia for a really long time, which is like we get erased from the dominant narrative. And then as individuals, we're kind of looking and we're like, well, if we don't exist, like, what am I? Like, if you don't exist, like, it's kind of existential, right? Like, I'm here, but you don't believe I'm here. And so what does that mean for me?
It's interesting we're talking about Appalachia, and yet we're both people who have left. Well, I've come back since then, but I left. I went and spent 7, 8 years in Chicago. You dig deep into your upbringing in rural America and specifically in Appalachia, yet you also fled to the big city. Why is my first question, and then I'll follow up with a more in-depth question.
Yeah, I mean, the why is pretty straightforward. The why is like no adults in my life were telling me that staying was an option.
Yeah.
Not teachers, not parents, not neighbors. Like, nobody presented it as an option. You know, by the time I was graduating from high school, the Chemical Valley, which is the area where I grew up, like, it was really falling apart. Like, the writing was on the wall. Jobs were just like leaving. Everything was shutting down. And I think the narrative was there's no work here. You got to go. And I think a lot about what would it have looked like if someone said, you know, you can stay. Like, here are ways that you can stay. Like, I didn't have the vision to see that for myself. I have profound respect for young people who are in Appalachia right now who can see that for themselves. I didn't have it. I didn't know how to see that. And so I left, and I think I've carried a lot of guilt about the leaving. And then I had a really interesting conversation with someone a few months ago who said, what are you talking about? Like, leaving is the quintessentially Appalachian thing to do. Like,
I
makes you Appalachian in a way. Like, that's what we
reading
like.
your book, and you asked the question, and I'm paraphrasing here. Do I even have any claim to the mantle Appalachian, considering my family came there for a job and then left because they needed to find work? And I thought to myself at the time, well, leaving because you need to find work is about the most quintessentially Appalachian thing that you could do. Like,
I actually think you might have written that in your review. I think that might be what I'm thinking of right now.
I was like, that's about as Appalachian as it gets right there.
Which was very freeing for me. I was like, oh, okay. Like, I guess I never thought about it that way, but you're right, and that's also hard. And I also I am like continually like so inspired by young people who are making the decision to stay and who are saying like, whatever you're telling me about what I can and can't do or who I can and can't be, like, I'm not gonna let that define me, right? I have friends from growing up who are queer people who still live in the town where I grew up. I know folks who are doing amazing organizing work, like in all kinds of places. Ray Garinger and the Country Queers podcast. I'm like, oh my God, to be Ray. Like, I am so inspired by Ray. And I'm like, I don't know how Ray is Ray. Like, how did Ray become Ray and how am I me? I don't know. But I do feel really, really inspired by people who just had more foresight, I think, than I did.
You grew up without a lot of blood relations around you. How do you maintain those relationships in general? Because I think the belief is a lot of people have is that it's harder to maintain relationships with people who aren't related to you. Family, you feel a sense of obligation to reach out. Friends kind of go by the wayside sometimes. How do you maintain those relationships with, through the time and the distance and the physical space between you, but also the political distance between you and some of the people back home?
I think the physical distance stuff has been easier to surmount, right? I'm going back next week. Like, I go back, I think, like, in a lot of ways, social media has been a blessing. There's also curses around it. But in terms of, like, staying connected to people, like, I think it is a way that you can do that. Like, I have an auntie group text. It's awesome. Like, I have ways in which we're able to stay connected to each other. And those bonds are also so tight that it's like you don't have to talk all the time, right? Like, I'm going home next week and there's like a fight among the aunties about where I'm staying. They're not literally fighting with each other, but it's like, there's some back and forth about where does it make most sense for you to stay, which is lovely. And like, we'll figure it out. But I think the political lines have been harder to navigate. And I think have eroded some relationships in ways that are really painful. That I don't like. That is the place where I feel like if you have blood in common, like maybe you would still keep going back to the table because you shared blood, and so you'd have to go to Thanksgiving or you'd end up at that wedding together. Yeah. I think when you don't share blood and your political views have become so divergent, it becomes harder and harder to even figure out how are we going to share space, and should we share space? Does that make sense, or have we just really gone down incredibly different paths from each other, and the best thing we can do is just give each other the grace of being like, we loved each other and we're gonna like let that stand.
One of the most interesting parts of the book for me was your attempt to square that circle and to really try and not only maintain those relationships with was it Mr. B, I think is what you called him in the book, and other folks back home who, you know, had some very, very loud and provocative things to say about all sorts of different people who weren't straight, white, Christian, native born Americans, you know, whatever the case may be. I wonder, how do you find the empathy to do that? How do you dig down and try to, because so many people have just been so quick to write folks off, and you may have written some people off, but the sense I got from the book was that you really tried not to do that.
Yeah.
And how did you find the strength and wisdom?
I mean, I think the thing is that you can't go back to where I grew up and not understand why people would be angry and hurting. No policymaker or politician at all is saying, here's a different vision for this region. Here's a different explanation for why things are the way they are. You have the Vance explanation, which is like people are lazy and, you know, just
genetically predispositioned to
right.
skullduggery or whatever it
poverty,
is. Yeah.
Whatever garbage rhetoric that is. These people just can't do better for themselves. And then you have the well, now he's going into the other thing, which is the xenophobic narrative, which is like, oh, everything that's happening in Ohio and West Virginia and Kentucky is because people are coming over the border and immigrants are taking your jobs and they're bringing drugs into our country. Like, those are the narratives that people are being offered. Appalachians,
which is such a different, it's a reversal of what they were saying 20 years ago when it's people in those countries taking our jobs, you know. Those jobs are going overseas. Now they're coming here and taking them. Make your mind up. Like,
well, and those jobs did go. That happened.
They did.
Right?
They did.
But again, like, there's no. That was like my biggest beef with that book, was like, you're not talking about that. You're not talking about the fact that that was a choice that corporations made and the government let them get away with, which is to take all those jobs and send them somewhere else. Like that, those were decisions that were made, right? Like. So the narratives you're being offered are narratives that you're either culturally deficient or that immigrants are to blame and queer people are to blame and black people are to blame. And there isn't another narrative.
You talked about being gender nonconforming in Appalachia and coming up as, you know, somebody who fell outside of the expected gender roles and norms that I think society thrusts upon us at a very early age.
I talk about this in the book, but like, when I brought my partner back to Appalachia, she kind of jokes that there's this game we play called Hillbilly or Lesbian, right? Because, like, it's not uncommon for older women in Appalachia to have short hair.
No, it's not.
A t-shirt and cargo pants or a t-shirt. Like, it's not that uncommon. What's interesting is that, like, those gender norms seem to fall away after about, like, 40. I'm 43 now, right? Like, they are most intense and most oppressive, I think, in your adolescence.
I think so, yeah.
I mean, early childhood through adolescence, but I think there is a point at which they seem to stop for women or like people who present as women. Maybe they wane a little bit because this is not unusual. Like short hair is, I mean, my hair maybe is a little bit more like, my stylist would kill me if I said that like they hadn't done anything, but like it's a little bit more styled maybe than that like late 40s, early 50s Appalachian cut, you know, But yeah, I do think
I know exactly the type of women you're talking about too. Like,
they were pumping gas at the gas station today when you were there. Like
it is like a very, very Appalachian / lesbian chic aesthetic.
And you're not really sure which. I mean, they could be both. They could be one. They could be the other. You're not sure, and it's fine. It's great. Like, but I do think the intensity around those norms is highest for young people, which is part of why I felt like this book was so important to write, and part of why that hair essay, I feel like I've used it with my students, and like I want people to use it with young people because I think it is most intense when you're trying to figure out your identity and you're getting messages
Right.
about like, this is what you should look like, and this is what you shouldn't look like, and this is right and this is wrong. Like, that's the point at which I think young people are trying to really be like, wait a minute, like, where am I in this? Where do I fall in all this? How do I figure out who I'm supposed to be? It's also what's so intense for me with these laws that are being passed where they're like, and these politicians calling like LGBTQ teachers groomers. Like, I feel so like, I mean, they clearly don't know how hard it is to figure that stuff out. And like how much one person offering you a hand and saying like, I can maybe help make this a little easier for you, like how much of a difference that can make for a young person, right? For that to be criminalized, like it's so painful to me because like I didn't have those people. I didn't have anyone to be like, okay, like I kind of understand maybe what's going on with you, and like maybe I can be helpful. And that stuff, it's life or death stuff. Like it's not small. People don't understand that, but it really is for queer kids. It can make a big difference. Being seen and being invisible, those things are life or death things. So this mentality that like if you're a teacher and you're out, or if you're a teacher and you make space for queer kids in your classroom, you're quote grooming. I find it so upsetting because I think it's like profoundly violent. I think that these people are casting themselves as protectors, and they're actually 100% the opposite of protectors. They are harming children, queer children who are gonna just really suffer because they won't have guideposts, or if they do, their teachers are. I mean, there was just a teacher in Kentucky who literally wrote on their board like, "You're loved and you're welcome," and lost their job because of that. Like,
I know.
I mean, it feels to me like a real crisis that again, like I just don't think the volume is loud enough. I think there are a lot of good and caring people in Appalachia who don't think this is their fight, and it's their fight because they have queer kids as neighbors, they have queer kids in their families, they coach teams with queer kids on them. It is their fight, whether they see it as their fight or not. It's their fight because those kids are really at risk with this stuff.
There's a little girl somewhere in Appalachia. This seems like a really good time to ask this question. But there's a little girl somewhere out there. Maybe she's a person of color. Maybe she's the daughter of immigrants. Maybe she's queer. Maybe she's gender nonconforming. Maybe she's some combination of these or all of these things. Let's assume that little girl is watching this right now. What would you say to her?
You're gonna make me cry. I think I would want to say that like there's gonna be a lot of really hard moments, like way too many, more than anybody should have to experience. But that like if she can just hang in there and find her people, you're gonna be okay. And that every person is not gonna be your person, and they don't have to be. But you have to find your people, and your people might not be your family. Your people might not be your church community. Your people might not. You might not know where they are right now, but they're out there. And that for all of us, like the thing that makes this life worth living and bearable, and in some cases even wonderful, is like when we find our people. And so I think like reducing your expectation that the people around you are automatically going to be your people, and making it instead like giving yourself permission to be like, yeah, these people aren't it, and that's okay because they're out there and I'm going to find them. I think if I could help young people to have that frame and be able to hang in there until they can find their people, I think that's all I want for them.
Wow. I can't wait to see what comes in the future for you. And I want everyone out there to go and pick up Another Appalachia, coming up Queer and Indian in a Mountain Place. It is available wherever you get your books now. And it is absolutely one of the most important books you will read this year. It really recontextualizes what it means to be Appalachian, and I think a very accurate and flattering light. You really write very warmly about the region that brought you up. So
yeah, I have a lot of warmth for it. So thank you, Skylar, for doing this. I really
Nima,
appreciate
thank you so much. You have a wonderful evening. Bye, everyone.
Hi, I'm Kim Finney,
co-founder of the Rural Youth Catalyst Project, and I'm also a proud member of the LGBTQ community. For Valentine's Day, the Rural Youth Catalyst Project, in collaboration with the Rural Assembly, launched a project entitled Love Notes to Rural LGBTQ Young People. We've had the honor of getting to know and work with LGBTQ+ young people and young people from LGBTQ families who are living in rural communities across the country. And they are amazing. These young adults are all leaders, passionate and informed about rural issues. They want to build a life in rural America, but all too often they have shared that they don't see anyone else in their community that looks like or is welcoming them. And now we've invited 4 powerful, brilliant, courageous, and passionate young adults to read the notes in hopes that they'll land in the earbuds, laptops, cell phones, iPads of another rural young person and let them know just how much they are wanted and loved. I'm honored tonight to introduce our circle of readers and people that I am so incredibly lucky and proud to get to know. Garrett Blaze, Frankie Edwards, Rachel Cole, and Mackenzie Ridgewood. Thank you so much, the 4 of you, for joining me and sharing the notes this evening.
Hi, my name is Rachel Cool. I identify as queer and non-binary, and I'm from California, Kentucky. We celebrate all the joy and love you bring. Dear rural North Carolina's LGBTQ+ community, you deserve a future that is brimming with opportunity, a life that is overflowing with love, and a community that embraces everything you have to offer. In the words of Glennon Doyle, you are human and your birthright is to remain fully human. So you get to be everything. Loud, quiet, bold, smart, careful, impulsive, creative, joyful, big, angry, curious, ravenous, ambitious. You do not need to shrink. You do not need to hide any part of yourself. We see you for who you are and celebrate all the joy and love you bring to the rural communities you call home. Happy Valentine's Day. You will always have a friend in us. Love, the North Carolina Rural Center.
So I'm Frankie Edwards. I am a gay man from Southwest Virginia. I currently live in Roanoke City in Southwest Virginia. You are not alone. I want you to know you are not alone in the LGBTQ community. Even though you are rural, every facet of life is infiltrated with us. I am a successful physician and live in an extremely conservative community, and it can be done successfully. Stay true to yourself and those you love. Donna Almond.
My name is Mackenzie Ridgewood. I am currently living and was born and raised in Arcata, Eureka, California in Humboldt County. It's pretty rural. I was adopted from here when I was 3 and by 2 lovely women who are my moms and have been since I was 6 days old and I came home, even though I wasn't actually adopted until I was 3. But yes, that is me. You belong. My name is Mariana Story Tuttle, and I'm a research fellow at the University of Minnesota Rural Health Research Center. As part of my work this year, I've gotten to hear some incredible people advancing LGBTQ+ health in their rural towns across America. I just wanted to reach out and tell you that you, yes you, belong in your rural community. You are seen, known, and loved, and you don't have to change an iota of who you are for that to be the case. Your beautiful self is who your community needs, whether you always feel that or not. Thank you for living your truth and being where you are right now. Big hugs from Minnesota, Mariana Story Tuttle.
My name is Garrett Blaze. I'm a queer person from rural Virginia, and I'm talking to y'all today from my family home in Tazewell County in Southwest Virginia. In your corner. My name is Lindsay Hanlon, and I'm from Cheyenne, Wyoming. I grew up away and back to Wyoming before realizing I was asexual and aromantic. I'm in awe every day of the LGBTQ youth in my communities who have found themselves already, and who have stood up to everything from indifference to hate in order to tell their own story. I want these kids to know that they are amazing, that they are brave and wonderful, and their hometowns belong to them just as much as they belong to bigots and bullies. I want them to know that they are loved and supported, and that there are many people in their corner, no matter how small their corner of the world is. Bess, Lindsay.
Awesome work. Just awesome work. Wow. Well done, everyone.
Making midnight music in the moonlight.
I love being able to sing in school. It's kind of the highlight of my day is being able to come here and not only see my friends but be able to sing, and some of the pieces that we've sung throughout the years have connected with me more than any other music that I've ever sung, so it's really meant a lot to me.
We're doing a training for artists who are interested in learning how to do murals, and it's called the Great Mountain Mural Megafest, and it's a part of a project that we're doing called the Southeast Kentucky Revitalization Project. And the overarching project is to train local people in community redevelopment, building renovation, downtown renovation. The work that we're doing with artists is hopefully going to lead directly to more murals in communities in the region and more money for local artists to paint those murals.
Actually, I was like really demotivated. I'm an oil painter, and so I heard about this workshop and I applied for the program, and they were able to pay for all the expenses. So I've been kind of trying to make it on my own as an oil painter, and a lot of towns are looking for artists to work on projects.
You can always print something graphic on vinyl. This is not that. This is like a hand-painted piece of art that is for the community and made by the community.
We'll be working on this part of the mural in here on painting on cloth, this parachute cloth, and it'll be attached to the wall. On this side of the wall, we're going to paint directly, and that's what they're calling the underpaintings. We'll do that and then attach the cloth that we work on in here.
So these are prayers and intentions that were written by the participants in the Mega Mountain Mural Workshop for the mural and what it can do for the community here in Cumberland. So the idea is that we are infusing this mural with all of our prayers and all of our intentions and all of our hopes and all of our dreams for what this piece of art can do to transform the Cumberland community.
It'll wake some people up, I think. Bring them out of the hills, get them to come down, maybe participate, because there's a lot of talented. I'm a teacher's aide also, so there's a lot of talented kids out there that I thought they need something like this that could get the whole community together.
So you can see that there's like some that's starting, that's going to be like
My name's Buffy Henry, and I'm the owner of Bus Bows and Gifts, and this is my building here that they're doing the mural on. It's exciting. The more things we have in this downtown area, things to make people stop and get out of their car and not just drive through, and I think this is going to be a real eye-catcher that will make people want to stop and see what there is to offer in this area.
You know, we're now in the internet age. We're in an age where workers can very often live wherever they want to. And the communities that don't attend to quality of life, that don't make themselves places people want to be, I just don't see how they're going to thrive in the new economy. I think everywhere we go now, we see the ones that do understand that are beginning to revive. And so it's all a part of building the community back.
I've heard many farmers say no one can understand this who hasn't done it. And to a certain extent, I think that's true. I was raised on a dairy farm. My family have been farmers since we arrived here from Europe before the Revolution. It is hard work. It's kind of a daylight to dark job. I wish people knew more about Sampson County in the sense of how blessed we are in natural resources. We're the #1 agricultural producer in the state. We have the oldest trees on the East Coast. There's a very diverse community of people here. The land has really supported a diversity of animals, birds, plants, waterways, and also people.
Clinton is the county seat of Sampson County. It's almost in the middle of Sampson County.
I've been in Clinton my whole life, and I feel like every week I learn something new. The people in Clinton are pretty welcoming, and they want to learn from you or want to learn with you or want to invite you into their space. I'd say 9 times out of 10, that's what you get.
I think the town overall seems to get along pretty well. Parents come out in droves for their children.
When someone is sick, you've got signs to pray for children. There is a pride in your local schools. There's a support on Friday night to go to your local football game.
Sampson County, is an ag-related community. We have a lot of that here with livestock. We have a lot of farmers, and really that's how this community operates.
That's Jeremy. He's the only rooster in there. So whenever I come to feed him in the mornings, I say ladies and Jeremy instead of ladies and gentlemen, and I think it's so funny.
Hi, this is Seth in the beautiful Applegate Valley. Really, from the very beginning, we as an organization, as a community, looked around and realized there's no government here, there's nobody in charge, and if we were going to do anything to support each other, we were going to have to do it together. And the community building that we'd already started was the foundation for the work that was to come.
When the COVID hit, we were luckily already prepared. We had all the networks necessary to activate immediately. We were able to set up a emergency food distribution system really quickly because we already knew everyone in town that was working with other people and had a lot of contacts and the people that activate. And when this happened, everybody already had a space to plug into, and that's not something that we could have done without the Ford family.
That was the place that all of that relationship building, all of that work building, that changed everything when COVID came here, because we were able to help folks really quickly come together and communicate around the issues they were facing, the needs that they had, and at least let them know that there were folks out there who were ready and willing to step up and assist in whatever ways we could.
And my impression is that the effective community responses to COVID-19, that is those responses that haven't been medical in nature but are more social, have been helped significantly by having community structures and relationships already in place.
Due to the strong leadership and encouragement in relationship building within communities that is present within FICB, Greater Applegate has been able to form really strong bonds between our business community, our nonprofit leaders, and then our local residents. And without those strong connections, none of what we have done in response to COVID would have been possible, whether it's from partnering with businesses to help feed elderly individuals and school children who are no longer without food, or aggregating really important information from within the community to be spread widely, or creating a mutual aid network of neighbors helping out neighbors.
We have greatly benefited from later opportunities to participate in work groups and personal and professional skill building through the Institute, leading us now to build greater community. This last year, we then had the skills and the confidence to reach out to other community builders and to focus on projects that would build a stronger community in Sisters Country. So as the pandemic then came upon us all, the connections were in place, the networks were in place, so that we can work together as a stronger community as we move through and then up and out of this pandemic.
Gracias a las herramientas que la Fundación Ford nos proporcionó con las clases de liderazgo, el conectarnos entre coordinadores de la zona del área, esto trajo como consecuencia que en esta pandemia actuáramos más rápido, ya que teníamos las conexiones con diferentes organizaciones.
We're out here in Harney County in the wide open spaces of a rural frontier county. What means the most to us from Ford Institute for Community Building is they recognize that we need to build relationships, and building relationships takes time in our communities. Having these relationships in place during times of crisis has enabled our community to be in a position to carry on. And our schools and businesses were able to help find some help during the hard times of navigating this crisis. And they will continue to be useful as our community looks to see what recovery looks like.
So everything that we've done to bring food to the community, to be a reliable source of information, to bring entertainment online, all of these things come from the work that we were doing with the Ford Institute all along. But what seems most important to me now as I'm thinking about it is that we have been mirroring community building from the start and have really become a family. So it seems more like we're not out here all by ourselves anymore trying to figure this out, something that's never happened before, trying to figure it out on our own. We have people at the Ford family and people throughout the area, throughout Oregon and Northern California, all thinking about this together, all supporting each other and sharing ideas and rooting each other on. And that's really, maybe more than anything, what's kind of kept us going and really helped us understand that nothing is more important than community building in times of need. Thanks.
My name is Lenny Poitras, and I am the owner of Botanica Bead and Jewelry. My studio is up here in the upstairs of Alchemy, which is our artist cooperative. I make jewelry and I sell it downstairs, and we share the rent and we pay the bills, and we are able to work it out. Just being able to come in and interact with the artists, I think it really adds to the community. And what it does is it invites people from different places to sort of engage in the community. And you know, so many people come and they just are like, wow, Lander has so much going for it. And that's one of the reasons why, is because of our arts. It opens the community up to other people.
With the closure of Studio 320 and the impact of COVID-19, the Lander art scene was struggling, a problem for artists and for Lander because the arts sector helps bring money to local economies. The city of Lander had identified the arts as an important asset, and Lori Hunter had an idea for how to help. By reviving a building that once housed a saloon, she hoped to help revitalize the local art scene.
My husband and I ended up buying this building a year ago, and it was in pretty bad shape. The roof was leaking upstairs, you know, all this, and it was just we looked at it and it was just, we didn't want to see it fall down. I started to kind of see all this art coming into this block, and that was a light bulb moment. Let's make this an attraction based on the arts. So I started inviting the businesses around this block to come, kind of started having some meetings and just talking to people and letting them know this idea. And it's great as a tourist attraction because it can be a ping on a map of Lander, people looking for things to do. Let's go to the art district. It benefits the community as a whole, and of course it benefits the artists. We kind of have a home.
So when Lori reached out to the Lore Foundation and told us about the Lander Art District, I knew it was a perfect fit. We support livability projects at the local level, and economic development and the arts industry is a perfect fit. We developed 3 grants. We supported signage for the Lander Art District building. We subsidized the studio space for 6 months. That gave the artists incentive to go for it and try this thing out. The 3rd grant was sort of a marketing grant. Basically, they had a big ribbon cutting ceremony where all the art buildings were open to the public, doing demonstrations. There was music all over the place. The mayor was there, and we helped support that.
Sometimes it can be kind of a limiting thing to be in a small town. Lore helping out with this funding of this space really helped at a time when it's turned out to be a really good year so far, but we didn't necessarily know that, so that Lore impetus is really important. We support Lander, but Lander really supports us. I couldn't ask for a better group of people, really.
Come into the stores, shop these local artists. It's pretty amazing what we have here.
We are the Rural Assembly.
We are the Rural Assembly.
We are the Rural Assembly.
Building a more inclusive nation.
Building a more inclusive nation.
Building a more inclusive nation.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Well, that concludes our first day of main stage programming for Rural Assembly Everywhere. Thank you so much for joining us for those wonderful videos and stories and conversations. But don't leave yet. It's not over. You have just a little bit of time to take a break. And then I hope that you'll come back to us at 5 p.m. Eastern for one of 2 breakout sessions. So you pick. We're posting in the chat right now more information about each of the breakout sessions and the links to them. If you registered for this conference, you'll also get an email with links to those breakouts. So be sure and come back, because that's where you can really engage and chat and talk face to face with some people and drill down into a topic. Then we also hope you'll stick around for a happy hour, which is going to be hosted by our daily Yonder friends. the good, the bad, and the elegy. There'll be a little bit of trivia and it'll just be a really fun evening. So 5 o'clock breakout session, 7 o'clock Eastern, happy hour. Again, those links will be available here in the chat. And then please return tomorrow because we've got some really great conversations coming up. We've got an interview with Bo of the Fifth Column. We also have a conversation with some of my neighbors here in McMinn County who are talking about book bans. So we'll see you then. Have a wonderful evening.
And we all chime in and say, remember, right? Minnie can say it. Oh, yeah, Bob.
Yeah, that's right. Whatever you say.
Some intro, all of us have to sing. All right, it's been rolling.
You know what to do.